made Vishal sit here because founder is the center of universe.
Center of attention. Does not.
Oh God. So, very emotional words from Akrit. I think angel tax is one topic that at least Sid and I should not be discussing in a public forum. We get quite emotional about it. For those who are not aware, Sid and I work together for at iSpirit, IVC, etc., fighting the battle on angel tax. It's been many years. Now, how many of you think angel tax is tax on angels? I first thought, I'm a lawyer, but I'm not a tax lawyer. So first when I heard it, as a law student or whenever, I thought angel tax is a tax on angels. Unfortunately, it is tax on the company in which angels are investing. And we'll understand more about it and see what are the pain points and what is this issue around angel tax. And more importantly, aside from the legality of it, how does it impact companies and investors, and how does it impact growth of the company in future? And of course, it is a reality. It is what it is. Taxes are, truth of life. So you have to deal with it. So how do you deal with angel tax? With that, I think, Vishal, why don't you tell us from a founder's perspective, when you thought you'll start a company doing certain business, when was the first time you raised capital? How did valuation discussion happen? How did you arrive at that number?
Just a brief background. So at WeRize, we are trying to build India's largest full stack fintech super app for small city India. So small cities, consumers, middle and low middle class customers. We have an impact mission. So essentially we help customers who live in small cities, do not have access to unsecured loans, credit cards, housing loans, health and life insurance, and let's say investment products. We have a full stack platform where we work with other banks, NBFCs. We have our own NBFC. Co-create, co-brand products meant for small city India customers who don't have these products. And then we have an army of freelancers like LIC agents and all, whom we manage through our platform. And they essentially help us acquire customers, and also they help us with collections. So we are a growth stage startup and recently turned profitable too. Now, thank you. And I'll come to the profitability and the tax implications of that later, which is the right kind of tax, right? So in terms of when we started, right? So Siddarth is one of the early stage investors in us. So I was the CBO of Lending Cart around 4.5 years ago when I left along with my current co-founder Himanshu. And when we left, we got a fairly large seed of a couple of $1 million at a completely ideation stage. Now, at that point of time, there were projections, obviously, that we had in mind, but the whole reason why we got that investment was because of the specific backgrounds that me and my co-founder Himanshu had, and that resulted in some valuation which is more in line with typically, let's say, a company of a certain stage, certain potential will get. The challenge as we'll discuss with angel tax is the methodologies that are recommended. Especially in the earlier stages, there is no way to know what's really going to happen, right? So when we started, we discussed a number, there were a couple of term sheets you negotiate, and then you take the money from considering the best valuation and the best long-term partnership. That's what matters. At that time, you don't even know whatever you're actually starting, what kind of projections are going to hold true. You do not have any comparables or anything to say how to arrive at a valuation. So at that time, it's just a negotiation, and it is in line with the market realities that goes ups and down like a stock market.
So idea, pedigree of founders, and some roadmap around the business. These are and a willing investor.
Yeah.
And among those willing investors, whoever is giving you the highest amount, you take that. Now that is valuation methodology for a startup.
And globally.
Globally. And that's, let's stay with this. This is how a founder views valuation. Now let's hear from a person who understands tax.
I just want to add, it's at the beginning of the company. Now,
beginning of the company.
Yeah, now we are fairly large, we are profitable.
Absolutely.
Right, this is at later stage, makes sense.
Absolutely. Once you grow, you have assets, you have projections, you have revenue, you have cash flow. There are many other ways. But we are just sticking with that first check that you receive. And hence the term angel tax, because that's the angel money you're receiving. And unfortunately, on that angel amount, you are being taxed. So Sid, how does the taxman view that? and why so?
Yeah, so actually, so the way Vishal actually spoke about valuation is exactly how every investor ends up valuing an early stage company. Even noted valuation experts like Aswad Damodar and Machi said, none of the traditional valuation methodologies can actually be applied to a startup due to the inherent uncertainty in their business model. Everyone has an idea, everyone has projection, everyone thinks they can become a unicorn in 12 months, 18 months, the very next day, etc., etc. But when these ideas clash with reality, is when, and to the benefit of hindsight, you can't end up actually taxing the difference. Now, the way the tax department actually views it, by the way, none of these are constituents of the methods that they've actually spoken about. What the tax department has actually said is, we either value these startups on your book value, so take all your assets minus all your liabilities divided by the number of shares issued, that's the value. So that's, in case your company is going to liquidation, that's actually the prescribed valuation methodology. How is that applicable when the company is looking at future prospects is something that we as industry have been scratching our heads for. Hopefully someday we get an answer for that in the fullness of time. The other thing they actually do is they look at your discounted cash flow method. They just say, come up with your projections sitting as of today, as of the current context that you have, come up with your projection for the next 5 years. And what the tax department does, which I do believe is one of the greatest disservices to the startup entrepreneurship ecosystem in India, is that the taxman actually sits over there, asks you for your projections, asks you for your actual audited performance and your audited financial statements, and then does a 1:1 comparison. Now, if you think about it, there's not a single person who's ever been able to project what's happened in the future. That person actually become the wealthiest person, become the most successful person,
including the government.
Including the government. If you look at the budget exercises, by the way, in every budget speech, the government actually releases revised budget estimate figures at that particular point in time. Even the government can't actually accurately estimate what's going to happen. And the government's one of the largest employees in the country as well. So how do they expect an early stage startup, 2 people and a laptop, don't even have a finance team? Most of them, even recently yesterday, Ritesh Agarwal said he didn't know what the term EBITDA actually meant. A number of them actually have that. How do they explain these kind of people to end up actually creating a plan, sticking to that plan 100%, and then actually taxing the delta? We have income tax for a reason. It's a tax on income. It's not a tax on capital. Angel tax, at the end of the day, is actually a tax on capital. Our greatest regulatory innovation is to actually convert capital flows and capital receipts into income and to actually tax that kind of difference. And even the valuation methodology they prescribed as of now, which, by the way, Sanjay, can't be used by Indian residents, can only be used by foreign investors. And what are these? Company comparable method. If you're 2 guys on a laptop, we were the first investors in Licious. There was no comparable for Licious in India at that point in time, which was fresh meat that was actually delivered to your home. Who do you actually find for that? They said, find a comparable for that. If the multiple was 8 as at a particular point in time, let's say the multiple became 6 for that matter, they would actually tax the difference. Probability weighted expected return method. That's a fancy way of saying, I believe the chance of me getting a 100x is, let's say, 0.1. The chance of getting a 20x is, let's say, about 15%. Chance of getting a 5x is about 30%. Multiply those, get a value, that becomes the value of the company. They can obviously question the probabilities. No one can figure out probabilities. That's why they're probabilities by name. Replacement cost, which is basically how much money does it take to actually replace that app. If you pivot, all the investment you made into your app, into your business goes down to 0. They'll actually disregard that. What service does it actually have? And then I think that the other two to look at is an option pricing method, which is fantastic if you use Black-Scholes for actual options, but if you invest in equity shares, where's the optionality built into that? You can't exactly figure that out. So what you have is this really theoretical method of valuation that is being force-fitted into actual business scenarios, and the most perverse thing is we're actually taxing the difference. It's patently absurd. But that's actually the heart of what the angel tax issue actually is. Because in 2009, there was a fairly prominent politician where allegations were made that they actually laundered money through a private limited company by investing at a very high share premium. In 2012, the government decided, let's actually tax all share premium then, which worked in 2012 because there wasn't much of a startup ecosystem. I think Flipkart was just around starting off at that point in time. We were just in the nascent stages of that thing. But fast forward to 2023, what role does the tax actually have to play? No one actually knows. But yet, it's an albatross across the neck of every single startup. If I fail to meet my numbers, for that matter, he fails to meet his numbers, his shareholders will punish him. His investors say, next round, I'm not going to give you that kind of multiple. I will lower your valuation. If you look at a listed company as well, when Apple actually, I think Apple or Amazon or someone, Amazon actually missed his numbers, they lost $230 billion of market cap, for that matter. If you look at a listed company, which is the greatest comparable, the price changes with every single transaction. If I go and buy Infosys stock at, let's say, 11 o'clock, at 11 o'clock and 2 seconds later, the price actually changes. Is that the right price? But what the government is saying is for an unlisted company, we have to decide the price 2 years in advance, and we'll end up taxing the difference. So this is a sort of patent absurdity that's been injected into the ecosystem. And yet, and this is actually kudos to the Indian entrepreneurs. That's why you're sitting in the middle, because you are actually king for that matter. Despite this sort of artificially injected rubbish, we still have the third largest startup ecosystem in the entire world. We've had the third largest number of unicorns, 111 unicorns, as of Zepto was the first unicorn of this year, which has been greatly celebrated for that matter. And we've actually become this large. So that actually proves one thing. No matter what the regulations are for that matter, if you can actually build a business in India, you can build a business anywhere else in the world. And that's kudos to the Indian entrepreneur and to the tenacity of that kind of person.
Which is why I said, by the way, don't get Sid and me started on angel tax. So,
I want to add one thing, right? So as an entrepreneur of this generation, right? I'm a first-time entrepreneur. Nobody in my family ever did anything like this. I think the government is in all other areas fairly good, right? Like I don't see any major compliance burden. We are a regulated entity. We are regulated by RBI. RBI is like super smart, right? The DLG guidelines that they came up with, very supportive. There was this recent, I was talking to Vint CEO Ajinkya, right, and the new bonds platform, that SEBI came up with in consultation with the fintech industry, right? The whole India stack, right? We would not be, even born as a company if India stack was not in place. There are so many things that our government thankfully is doing well. Somehow, this is one thorny issue. If they solve, I think that will unblock so much.
Although just to contextualize and playing devil's advocate, not devil's advocate here, but government's advocate
you are
in
the
this
advocate,
case.
huh?
I think the problem is that, and just for those who may be unaware of exactly what the tax is on, the tax is on a company which is raising money for more than what its fair market value is. So if your actual value is say 10 rupees and you are getting money from somebody at 1 lakh rupees, then the remaining delta is taxed in your hand as your income because you don't deserve that money, you have raised it above your actual value. And why was this a problem? Like Sid was saying, there were instances where people were artificially raising money in their companies which were not valued. And it was just a mechanism of channelizing cash. And when government sees any manner of channelizing cash for the sake of it, government taxes it. Right? That's the natural consequence. And therefore, it is trying to solve a bad actor situation, but good actors are getting hit in between. Now, let's quickly move on to the fact that it is a reality, right? It is what it is. What do entrepreneurs and investors do to ensure that this is taken care of to the best possible way?
Yeah, I think one of the best, so the government's thought process this is actually very simple. They view a large amount of investors in these sort of startups with a high degree of suspicion. And the only formal channel that's available to people to end up investing into startup companies without attracting angel tax is to actually invest through a SEBI-registered AIF or an IFSC-registered AIF for that matter. So either you invest to a category 1 VC fund, to an angel fund such as Let's Venture for the same, there's no chance of the angel tax that actually ends up applying to you. But I think the one thing, Sanjay, that should also be noted for that, so that's one part. The second part that also need to be noted, that since 2012 all the way to 2023, we've had Aadhaar actually coming in. Aadhaar is actually been linked to your PAN. They've stopped the ability for people to actually invest using cash. Everything has to come through formal banking channels. We have to file Form 61B with the tax department, which actually says in case you issue securities more than 10 lakhs, the name of the person, the PAN of the person, the contact details, everything is already given. If you're a salaried individual paying more than 50 lakhs, with income more than 50 lakhs for that matter, you have to declare every single unlisted and foreign asset in your tax return itself. We've actually had numerous kind of situations that come in. Even the industry's gone to the government and said, look, if you believe the listed guys are actually all kosher, and that's also fairly debatable because there have been numerous instances that SEBI has found of people trying to launder money through small penny stocks, etc., which is why we have the ASM1, ASM2 mechanism. That's additional surveillance mechanism 1 and mechanism 2 that SEBI has actually instituted. We have a situation where we said, look, why don't we demat all the securities? But despite these sort of elements, we haven't seen this actually get actually picked up. Now, think about it. What are we trying to solve through angel tax? We're trying to tax commercial dislocations as income. If someone's laundering money, there are numerous other ways for them to actually go about. Which brings me to the second point. As founders, as investors, be very careful with the people you end up actually investing with. So when you actually if you are speaking to a startup who's actually raising a round, don't just ask about the projections, what they're doing, the founder pedigree, and all that good stuff. Ask who are the people actually investing alongside with you. Have they actually asked these people? Have they actually done any basic sort of research, even a social media search to figure out how they end up operating? The third part you need to end up doing is be prepared to answer the taxman for every single angel investment that you make. It is expected, mind you, that there's a good chance your company will actually end up getting a tax notice. The moment you do, for that matter, and this is unfortunate once again, the tax department places the startup as an intermediary between you as the investor as well as the tax department. But they force the startup to go to you and ask you for your bank statements, ask you for your last 3 years IT returns, and ask you for your financials. If you put a 5 lakh check or a 10 lakh check, why would you actually give a third-party entrepreneur, founder, no offense, that you never actually met, why would you give them this sort of sensitive information? But here's the kicker. There is actually a section under the Income Tax Act, section 133(6), and I've actually shared this with the Less Venture team. They'll put it up on their website with an entire playbook that 314 created for handling these sort of situations, where the taxman can actually directly ask you this information. Now, obviously, the question is, why is the taxman asking you your tax returns when he is actually sitting on the tax returns of the entire country? But keeping that aside, make sure that you have the ability to end up actually giving this kind of information to them. There are additional hoops, and I think the last part, which I think is also fundamentally important, make noise about it. Every time we have an angel tax issue, because I've been working on it, Sanjay's been working on it, Nakul is at the iSpace team has been working on it far longer than any of us for that matter. When we go out to industry and we ask them, have you got an angel tax notice, no one actually steps forward. So when we meet the tax department, and we met the finance minister, we met the CBDT chairman, we met the finance secretary, revenue secretary, everyone. They say, give us numbers. We don't have numbers. I think what's a good initiative for Less Venture to actually do is to create a website to say, if you are a startup in India who's actually got an angel tax notice, please give us your details. So the next time the government says, is angel tax such a massive issue? We have a repository of 100, 200, 300, 400,000 startups and say, look, this is the actual issue they've done. This is the amount of angel tax demand that is actually there. And we don't need great information. Name of the company, DPIT registered number, that's a must. Contact information, how much capital you raised, when you got the notice. That's basically it. With these 5 items, we can end up actually fighting this tax. But the problem is, as Indians, we're so used to something bad happening, we'll turn the other cheek. There's a Mahatma Gandhi statement, I turn the other cheek, that becomes a problem. I think it's about time we act. And for the last, since 2016, this became a problem. And now in 2023, because of the lack of action, the lack of reaction from the entire ecosystem, is why this is actually becoming as exacerbated as what it actually is. So I think it's important for us to end up acting and arm yourself with knowledge, for that matter. I think that's actually crucial. Speak to your accountant. There's plenty of resources available online. Just learn that, because when a founder comes to you, they come to you as an angel. They're not just looking at a source of capital. They're looking at mentorship. They're looking at advice. And this sort of basic knowledge actually gives them the ability to end up actually. Now, it is horrible being an entrepreneur. We were first investors, then we know the amount of trials and tribulations they've actually gone through, even tried to fundraise during COVID, fundraise during everything else that's happened. He's managed to come through, but he's one amongst thousands, and those thousands have actually failed. So we celebrate these kind of people, but you have to support the remaining 999 who weren't actually as fortunate. And as investors, I think that's important. If you want an easy job in investing, invest in a mutual fund. If you really want to put in effort, invest in a startup, invest in an angel fund, make a difference.
I think two key points to take away from that. One, of course, is if you're an angel investor investing in a company, you need to really make sure that the pedigree of other investors is correct. What that does is somebody has to make sure that the company is doing the right thing to have correct paperwork to be presented to the tax officer as and when that question comes. And what is that paperwork? It is actually valuation report. Valuation report should be issued by somebody who is who can be trusted enough by the system, not just run-of-the-mill CA somewhere. And the methodology that has been applied. So there's a lot of context that goes into preparation of those documents. And as an angel investor, I think it's very difficult. You can't get into these matters, businesses, etc. But you need to ensure that there's some good pedigree of investors who are coming along. Second thing is, like Sid said, advice to the founder. And if there are founders in this room, I think take this advice. This one issue is something which should be at the back of your mind at all times, even when you grow to C, D, E, F level at all times, because this FMV question will always remain a constant. You will keep raising money, which the tax department will always think is higher than what your worth is, and that becomes a pain point. Sid here, by the way, comes from a VC where it's an AIF, and if an AIF invests, they are not subject to tax. Angel tax doesn't apply to AIFs. He's exempt. but he's still making all the right noise about it because, and may I let you answer that? Because if Sid invests in a company where other investors are getting taxed, or because of other investors, foreign investors, other corporate venture funds, etc., if other people are investing in the same capital and because of that there's a tax impact, Sid's investment is only reaching a certain amount of value and it is, it's just optimizing there, that's all. That plateau is hit very, very soon. So for Sid's investment to become optimal, it is critical that nobody else is getting a bad tax on it. If there are anyway so many regulatory issues in investing in India, adding one more layer to it, and angel tax has been extended to foreign investors very recently, it is a big deterrent for people to invest. And despite the fact that domestic VCs are exempt from this, it is not a good thing for domestic VCs. It's a bad thing. And that's why Sid is leading this charge.
Now, so just to add to that, see, I think the issue at the heart of angel tax once again is comparing projections to actual performance. And I've personally dealt with over 100 odd angel tax cases. Thankfully, not at the portfolio for that matter, but also other people in the entire wider ecosystem and all as a whole, because it's important for us to actually defang this. What we found to be the most effective deterrent is actually management commentary. So when the management actually says, look, my projections were so much, but I couldn't reach these projections for X, Y, and Z reasons, that actually has tremendous weight. In the annual report that every company has to file, I know most of the annual reports is actually very unfortunate. It's just prepared by the CA where the standard format is that you fill in the blanks with all the numbers, then you end up filing that. Whereas you look at a listed company annual report, there are more corporate commentary than they are actually disclosures that you end up needing. I think it's important to use these kind of tools. The moment you file it with the MCA and you actually give commentary on your entire performance, why you may not have actually missed your numbers and the same, that becomes sufficient and adequate audit evidence for the taxman to actually rely on. Because you've acknowledged the fact that you've missed your numbers. There's nothing wrong in missing your numbers. I think that's very, very important. Life doesn't run like an Excel sheet. You can't write 3 numbers, drag it down, and imagine that life actually goes like a linear equation for that matter. There's inherent uncertainty in that. But if you take the basic step of advising your company to actually put this kind of commentary together, discuss that in an AGM, not a paper AGM, mind you, which is unfortunately very, very prevalent for startups for that matter. But take this sort of corporate governance more seriously. You build great defensibility against angel tax. Because that's the thing we have seen. Most of the companies who unfortunately suffered from this have chosen to have a chalta hai attitude. Yeah, I'll ignore the thing, it comes, why do I matter? Why does it matter? It's just a tax department notice, they can't do anything, etc. That's why we end up actually facing that. Or even worse, when they get a notice rather than trying to do something, or trying to actually, when people reach out to you to help, they rather just go on Twitter, go on Facebook, go on social media and rant. Government policy does not change because someone actually tweeted that finance minister and actually said something nasty over there. There are proper means and avenues of actually engaging with government stakeholders. And I think that's also a sign of maturity. If you looked at the US or any of them, a large number of those founders spend an immense amount of time with Congress, with the regulator, actually speaking about what they're actually doing. So I think that level of maturity, and that can't only be incumbent on the founder. The founder has enough on his plate. It's also incumbent on the investors to actually advise them to say, look, do this. We've seen out of the numerous cases we held, a number of them actually got away because they went and explained to the person, this is why I missed my numbers. And then he asked the guy, have you met anyone that actually met their numbers so quickly? He said, no. He gave them basic information about the investor and he said, yeah, I agree, you missed your numbers for genuine reasons. I'm not going to tax the difference, I'm going to move. But if you don't give the tax, and by the way, being the tax guy, I know I'm playing the government's advocate, taking over from you, it is horrible being in their position. In case you make one mistake or something actually slips through the cracks, the Central Vigilance Commission actually goes after them. So for them, it's easier just to end up painting everyone with the same brush as opposed to putting in the effort to differentiate. So you have to meet them halfway. You have to actually have a dialogue with them, document all these kind of things. All this is already written. I've shared this with the Let's Venture team. Hopefully they end up putting it up on their website and end up taking up that initiative that I spoke about also. But these are solvable problems. It's angel tax. Ultimately, I want angel tax to become like that pothole in front of all our houses. It's something that's already there. Everyone's already aware of it. Everyone knows how to navigate it, how to avoid it, and end up actually moving on with life. It becomes from a life-changing situation to a minor inconvenience. I think ultimately, I don't believe angel tax, despite fighting it since 2016 and for longer for that matter, I don't believe angel tax is going to go away. Yeah. So I think the important thing is let's learn how to live with it. Let's defang it for what it's worth. So that the actual application of angel tax can go against the crooks who are trying to launder money, as opposed to genuine people like Vishal who are actually trying to make a difference to the country and actually build it.
And I'll just end with one piece, Vishal, if you have any word of advice to investors who are going to be working with early stage companies, very early stage in their life, they don't know, most founders would not know what this angel tax is all about. Any word of advice to the investors? or companies which are very early stage in their life cycle, what should they keep in mind?
I think this. I don't think I have a comment. Really, I'm not an expert in this,
So-
but maybe just take this seriously, right? Like,
would it have helped if somebody told you
Yes,
earlier
yes,
that there
yes.
is something like
yeah,
this?
yeah, like
That if you are documenting all your discussions in a proper way, minuting in a board meeting, saying that look, these are the reasons why my valuation is what it is, and yes, there is a DCF, yes, there is ABC also, but there are other parameters as well, and there is a likelihood that somebody may question you on the valuation that you have agreed over a cup of coffee with somebody.
I agree. I think regulation or these issues, right? Most of the regulation, I think, has good intent. Somehow this one, probably, I'm sure there is some intent which they're trying to protect against. And because we are a regulated entity, we anyway go through like huge amount of compliance and all anyways, and that's a fact of life for us, being an RBI regulated entity. The thing is, as you kind of said, right, like, don't assume that this won't happen to you. Learn in advance.
Yep.
Find some mentors,
Yep.
either in existing investors, if not, work with some tax consultants and all. But seek advice. And don't think that these things will just go away.
Yeah, until and hopefully
Yeah.
it will go away at some point. Until it goes away, I think the most
Yeah.
important thing is it is value destructive for everyone if there is that tax notice that comes and you don't have anything to defend yourself with. And therefore, one piece of advice to all startups and early stage investors is to have that piece of paper in place,
Yeah.
at least.
I think not just getting advice, but also acting upon it. I think as a founder and as an investor, you will have
That's what I
infinite
meant,
number of
like,
people who will actually
take
give you
advice and implement.
who will actually give you advice. But make sure you actually pick and choose the right advisors and actually act on that advice as well. So I think that's going to be important. Look, it is one of those things of actually being Indian, right? For that matter, huh? It's something that ends up happening. So unless we actually work together, let's actually defang it. For that matter, there are so many other. I think Sanjay can actually speak about as a lawyer, huh? as a fantastic lawyer for that matter. So many other laws that India has on paper, which actually seem so onerous but are seldom actually implemented, for that matter. Hopefully, angel tax actually becomes something like that. And only way it can is for good actors to actually speak up, rather than actually just staying silent and suffering, and actually making the situation worse for everyone who's actually involved.
That's true. Any person receiving any notice of this nature, I think we have to bring it up to the authorities, and we are collating all that data and bring it up. I think with that, I will end this session unless there are any questions. There is
Hello.
there
Yeah,
are two
guys.
questions.
Here,
there are
here.
three questions.
Okay. Great discussion, guys. I think I agree with everything which was said. Bad actors is the reason it came in. I was a MD of HSBC at a point in time, so spotting bad actors has been a way of life for me. Therefore, I appreciate why this came in. But I also thought, in the context of genuine startups, if you are DP, IIT recognized, it does not apply. So what are we missing? I mean, you get that?
So
I can answer
go
that.
ahead.
I'm very happy. This is one of my pet peeves also. So I can actually, let me actually start from the beginning. There are two kinds of DPIT registered startups in the country. One is a DPIT registration, which is fairly simple. You go on, it takes about 30 minutes, you fill up a form, give basic details, write about how you're innovative, how you're generating wealth, etc. You get a DPIT number, which is wonderful. The second level is known as the ATIAC registration, which gives you tax benefits, which is a 3 out of 10-year tax holiday. It also gives you several concession income tax act and also an exemption from the application of angel tax. I just got an article as of today. There are only 8% of the 1 lakh odd companies registered with DPIT have actually gotten that. Actually, just in the beginning of this year in January, when we had about 82,000 startups, only 1,600 startups had actually gotten that registration. It is genuinely easier to get into the IIT than to actually get a group of bureaucrats to certify you as innovative. That's how broken that system actually was. So what the DPIT did, because of the work that Nakul, Sanjay, myself, Sharath, and a number of other people actually started doing for that matter, is on February 19, 2019, they released a circular. We said that if you are a DPIT registered startup, not the tax one and all for that matter, and if you for 7 years after the last time you raised money at a premium, don't do 11 different activities, we will not apply angel tax to you for a capital raise up to 25 crores. And you know what those 11 odd activities include? You can't make any loans and advances unless you're a lending startup like our friend Vishal over here. You can't deal in shares and securities. You can't make any capital contributions, which sounds fair. The other things are like don't buy jewelry, don't buy helicopters, which I found to be fairly odd. Don't buy a car, don't buy all this kind of stuff, unless it's the ordinary course of business. But let me actually just extrapolate and explain what that means. It means that during COVID, if you were this February 19, 2019 registered startup, it's called the Form 2 registration. If you were that, you couldn't give a single salary advance to any of your employees despite that person's family dying. You can't. If you are buying a capital asset and the vendor asks you for an advance, you can't. And you know what the kicker is? The tax that you pay to the government, your TDS and everything that, or even your advance tax for that matter, is classified in your balance sheet under loans and advances. So even doing that ends up violating that particular issue, which is true. You can't create an ESOP trust. You can't evangelize and generate greater wealth for all your people. SEBI recognizes an ESOP trust, Companies Act recognizes the ESOP trust, but the tax department says, no, you can't do that. You can't form a subsidiary. You can't form a JB. You can't acquire anyone for stock. So when you have these sort of restrictions, and mind you, those restrictions are for a period of 7 years after the last time you raised money. So if you take the normal DPIT definition of a startup, which is 10 years, 17 years, you can't do any of these basic elements that are there. And the kicker is it's only up to 25 crores of a raise. 25 crores is about $3 million, which is about an average Series A. So even if you escape in the seed stage, at the Series A, you'll end up getting caught. What's the purpose of that?
Then the right fight is to get it defined correctly, right?
We've
probably win that
tried.
as opposed to saying, take this away.
That was the assumption, by the way, and that was the assumption we had 2015, right? Yeah. 8 years back. That was the assumption that let's not fight this tax, it's not going to go away, let's ask for rationalization. Day before yesterday, another circular came where they said that an assessing officer who receives who is issuing a tax notice under Section 56, etc., if it is for a startup, then it should not be whatever. But there are nuances in that. The point is that Income Tax Act came in 1961, and it has been refining ever since, right? GST law came in 8 years back or whatever, and it's been refining. It will take time to refine this to get that perfect provision. Until then, many people would have moved bases from India. We are trying to attract talent and making them keep their companies in India. And here is a provision that is making them go away. Once we lose the bus here, then there is no second coming.
And by the way, we have brought this up to the government on numerous occasions. You said your February 19, 2019 circular does have fatal flaws. It does not apply to all kinds of startups. We need something better. We went to the extent of saying we'll demat all our securities, be completely transparent, give you the details of all the shareholders, go ask them whatever details you need, etc. But of no avail. So what has been, and one of the reasons that's happened is every time we go there and we say we're speaking on behalf of 1 lakh startups, we're like, how many have been affected? We can barely muster 20, 30 names together, despite local surveys, local circle survey, which are done with IDC in 2019, got about 2,800 companies who said, yes, we actually got that. But unless the industry speaks up, and India is a country of large numbers. I go there saying 10, 20 people are affected, boo-hoo, it makes no difference. You go there saying 1,000 odd people are affected, then that makes a material difference.
It actually happened with us.
Every person who's actually silent on this, not actually speaking about it, is actually complicit in the fact that these things have actually gotten worse. And now with this applying, it was called angel tax because we applied to angel investors, and out of all the money raised by Indian startups, Indian rupee capital or domestic capital roughly constitutes about 7 or 8% of that. AIFs constitute another about 8 to 10% of that entire money for that matter. The rest of the majority of the money actually came in from foreign sources. Because these family offices and angels only operate in the seed stage, that's why it's called angel tax. But now, that foreign investors are also come under that ambit. And some of the conditions they put over there are so onerous, it's impossible for genuine funds to end up actually meeting. We're at risk of actually seeing close to 92% of the total capital raised by Indian startups subject to this tax. Can an ecosystem genuinely survive when 92% of the money and the lifeblood that you need is actually going to be taxed as revenue at 25% at some point in time? Absolutely not.
And one more thing is that eventually after all this ranting, we do it all the time. Sid and I met yesterday again, same rant happened. We eventually go back and go with that approach that, maybe it's not going to go away, let's try and rationalize this with the government and see. But not happening so far. It's been 8 years. Second, and we'll just restrict to 2 more questions, Yeah,
the main part of rationalization is this, are you able to hear?
Yeah. I can, yeah.
The notice to startup to get all the data from investors, right? So as an investor, I got a mail from a startup. They're asking not only returns for 3 years, they want profit and loss accounts, they want bank statements, everything like that, right? And I'm sure no investor would have given to the startup. So how can startup comply to that notice? Like
So there's
at
a
least
section.
This part can we get it?
There's actually, so there are two things here. One, there's a section known as Section 133(6) of the Income Tax Act, where in case you actually, the startup ends up actually giving the PAN and the contact details of the investor, the tax department can directly reach out to that particular taxpayer and ask them for information. But the question is, how many people actually know about this? The answer is very few. The second, which I don't know what sort of credence you can place on that, is that when Ashwin Grover actually tweeted about this a few days back, the CBDT official verified blue-tick CBDT handle actually responded saying, in case of these kind of situations, the company can end up giving the PAN of that particular investor, and then the tax department will actually reach out to it. So I personally believe that we as a country haven't reached a stage where we end up announcing actual policy through Twitter or social media for that matter, as opposed to actual circulars. But I think what's going to be important is follow these two paths which are there. Don't let the startup become an intermediary between the tax department and the investor. So mind you, the startup has to respond in a way, has to say, here's the section number in which you can ask it, here are the contact details of the person, here's the PAN of the person. Now please make your own independent inquiries on the same. That actually ends up actually fulfilling it to a large extent. So the moment you become, what we've seen is some of these startups don't even respond, they end up getting caught in the middle. That's when the entire thing actually falls apart for them.
There's one more question.
Yeah,
Thank you.
hi. My name is Madhurima, and thank you for this. I'll walk out of this session slightly more aware about this angel tax. When you mentioned, Siddarth, that we should not just invest in startups as we are, just give money and else we should just do it as SIP. The challenge I've faced, I've been investing as an angel for the past 2 years through AIFs and through syndicates. I don't get to know what the startup is facing, right? For me, it's just the AIF or the lead investor who's the face that's talking to the startup. Do you have any suggestions on how we can get to know about these issues and help the startup when we are not the lead investor or?
Yeah, no, so I think one of the most important part is because you're investing through a syndicate or an AIF for that matter, which are also exempt, you are actually part of the solution wherein your money won't end up attracting that particular tax. So I think the more formal channels, I think what the intent of the government is to also formalize the avenues of raising capital by startups for that matter, which is why angel funds and the like actually become important over there. The second part that is also put, engage with your lead investor. Honestly, your lead investor will have rights as information rights, etc. during that particular part. But the question is, how many members of a syndicate end up actually reaching out to their lead investor to say, hey, has anything happened? Can you give us an update? The only thing people ask is, has he raised a round of funding? What is the revenue as of now? Is he profitable? Thank you. Right?
No, sadly, in my case, even when we want to offer help because of their time constraints, I think we don't get a response. But that's a different
conversation,
challenge.
right? See, there are, because there have been, and Vishal can actually speak about this as well, there have been instances in the past where there are investors who are not that sophisticated, who end up actually monopolizing the time of the founder by asking Indian questions, because they're used to listed companies with positive cash flows and profits, etc. And then they start going after the founder saying, yeah, you're unprofitable, what is this, my investments are at risk, that kind of stuff. There is a perception and a cloud that ends up actually existing. And that does actually end up happening. I mean, we run a fund as well when it comes to information rights, etc. We primarily keep that towards institutional investors because we've seen at times that it has been misused. And even fortunately at times where this information actually ends up getting leaked to the media as well, which are problematic. So there are issues that exist. I don't think it's an intent issue that's actually there. But if you actually put in the time and effort to end up actually trying to strike up that dialogue, make that kind of conversation, they will actually end up taking that fairly seriously. But you have to differentiate yourselves from the normal perception of how some of these unfortunate angels have ended up actually polluting the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, no, fair point. Thank you for that.